We are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. And we've got a very different one today, I suspect. More of that later. Anyway, if you don't know, my name is Dr. Steve Simpson. My background is as a medical doctor, but for the last 10 years, I've been working as a mind coach with elite performers. Well, who are elite performers? Well, actually, they're people just like you. But if you're really at the top of the game, then the difference between an elite performer and somebody like you or me is that they have truly learned how to get into their unconscious mind, because that is the home of peak performance and luck, and of course, quite a lot of other things too. So why am I talking about hypnosis tonight? And I do it with, I have to be honest, a bit of trepidation. It's a strange one because if you look at my website and my books and stuff, you won't see or hear too much about hypnosis. And the strange thing about it is that actually of all the things that I have to do in my life or choose to do in my life, hypnosis is the thing that I'm far the best at. And I try to say that modestly, but it's the truth. We're all very good at one thing, and hypnosis, for some strange reason, is what I do pretty much unconsciously, and I get pretty good results in myself and in my clients. And I say this with some trepidation because obviously I'm going to do my best over the next 25, 30 minutes to explain what it is, and also to show you a little bit of hypnosis and describe how you can use some of these techniques on yourself, at least to some extent. And before I go any further, I'd better mention a very serious, and this is my serious face, I mean it, this is a health and safety warning. It's very important. Even to say the word hypnosis puts me into a trancey state. So you should not be driving cars, operating machinery. You should only be listening and watching this when you're in a safe place and you can truly relax. So if you can't, then please switch off. The download version will be available within an hour of the end of the show, and then you can watch and listen to that at your leisure. Okay, serious stuff finished with. So what is hypnosis? I looked it up on Wikipedia today because I mentioned I don't really know myself, and frightened me. There's so pages of stuff on it, and I started reading it, and I thought I'd better stop. I'm never going to be able to do a show about this. But I will start with the definition, which I can agree with. Hypnosis is an altered state. And then it goes on to talk about focus and relaxation and suggestibility and placebo effect and all loads of other stuff that I don't recognize. So how can I put this simple? To me, hypnosis is a connection to the unconscious mind. We can connect to it by any way that will produce these delta and theta waves in our brain. So we've already mentioned meditation and mindfulness. That was in the last show. If you didn't watch that, by the way, I do recommend you do so, because that last show goes very much in line with today's. And why do we want to get into the unconscious? Well, as I mentioned in the introduction, it's the home of peak performance. It's where magic lives, it's where luck lives, and it is vastly more powerful than we can realize. And if we are going to be really serious about getting the best we can out of life, whatever it is, then it's pretty critical we find ways to get there. Another question I asked myself, so that I could hopefully answer it for you in case you're having these thoughts as well. Can anybody be a hypnotist? Well, I don't know whether this is good news or bad news, but I think anybody can. It will take some efforts, but probably nowhere near as hard as you might imagine they would be. Indeed, like so many things that I talk about, like confidence and resilience, I think to be a hypnotist is our default state. And there's a little bit of evidence to suggest that what I'm saying is not completely crazy. You know that I'm a student of biology as well as medicine, and if ever I have a question, I go to the natural world to try and find an answer. Well, evolution provides lots of answers, even though we don't really know what evolution is and how it happens. But what I can tell you is that our voice, our ability to communicate with each other, is a fairly late evolutionary development in our family tree, because we had to have this special thing called a voice box with vocal cords that can vibrate. But before we had this wonderful piece of kit that we can speak through, we were still able to communicate when we lived in caves and stuff. We would grunt at each other and we would communicate with our body. And even though we couldn't speak, we could still make noises. Mm, 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 mm. And each inflection, each little noise, it meant something different. And some might call that hypnosis, because hypnosis is only a form of communication. So anybody can be, and just remember, you're surrounded by hypnosis in your life anyway, because there are loads of people out there who know how to get us into this altered state of whatever we want to call it. They include people who design these wonderful adverts that convince us we have to go out and buy the latest car that we've seen on TV. Politicians can be pretty good, or the people who write their speeches can be pretty good. So hypnosis is not just the guarded, narrow field of the specialist hypnotherapist. How do you train to be a hypnotist, or how can you at least learn a little more about it so that you can use it for yourself, or when you get really good at it, you can use it with others to help them too? Well, that's a difficult question because there are so many different ways to train as a hypnotherapist. The classical way is that you sign up with a college course and you go to lectures. Some of these things now are done online, and assuming you pass all the assignments, at the end of it, you get a diploma and a certificate, which is good. But does it mean you're a good hypnotist? Well, it might do, but it not necessarily so either. All I can tell you is how I trained to be a hypnotist. Well, the first thing I should say, by the way, is, well, no, yeah, this is part of it, actually. When I was 16 years old at school, one of our history teachers was a hypnotist. And of course, we were all fascinated as kids, and I volunteered to be one of his subjects. And so he demonstrated some techniques on me. And I wasn't greatly impressed or excited at the time, but it was very interesting. But I suppose I was excited enough to go home and try it out on my mother. Mistake number one. I managed to take her deep, that's for sure. But she had an ab reaction, and that's something that we might talk about later in the show. And that was really scary. So I didn't bother with learning or doing anything about hypnosis until, as it happens, 10 years ago. And I went to a series of training events and courses run by Richard Bandler, who you might know is the co-founder of the NLP movement, and Paul McKenna, who is a fantastic hypnotist and best-selling author and self-development guru, as is Richard Bandler. So there you are. There are two people who are probably the best two, or amongst the best two in the world. And I did all of my studying with them. And I wanted to learn quick, and that's why I studied with them. So my recommendation, if you can afford it, for anything you want to do in life, is go to the very best people. So I would definitely recommend either of those two if you really want to learn about hypnosis and the unconscious mind. So what else did I do? Did I read any books on hypnosis? No. Bought one, I read a few pages, and I couldn't understand a word of it. So that's about all I've read, other than the little bit of research that scared me this morning on Wikipedia. But what I did do is I really modeled Richard Bandler and Paul McKenna really well. I've been hypnotized by them on many occasions, and I've watched them hypnotize other people on many, many occasions. And each time I soak up as much information unconsciously as I can. And I suppose because of that, I modeled the stuff that works for me. And so that would be my recommendation. And if you can't do that, go to YouTube and you'll find plenty of work that McKenna and Bandler have put out. And you find a few things that I've done as well. So, you know, I've mentioned before, I made my first audio book, as some people say, is the best bit of work I've ever done. It was published on iTunes. It was called Zen Hypnosis Confidence. And it was #1 in Europe for a long, long time. And had some really great reviews. It's available not on iTunes anymore, but it's on my website, and you'll find it easily enough. And I think it costs $5 or whatever currency of the country you're living in. A little bit about classic induction, because I'm sure you will have seen hypnotists at work, and this is what they will do one way or another. It used to be, the old days, the swinging watch on the chain that they would ask the subject to look at and stare, and it was always a little higher than their eyes, and I guess this was to put some eye strain so that they were just dying to close their eyes. Well, I don't use anything like that at all. The other thing that you might have seen is that the person will be talking a lot to the client, and it will be along the lines of, as you breathe deeply, you will become more and more relaxed, and you will feel the muscles soften, and it goes on like that, which of course is very relaxing, it's very pleasant, but it's not necessarily hypnotic. And in fact, I've even seen people doing mass hypnosis, or a group of people, and they'll be reading from a script. That's the last possible thing you want to do, because if you're going to be a hypnotist, we have an expression, you have to go there first, which means you have to put yourself in this altered state before you can work with another person and bring them with you. So you ain't going to do that by reading a prepared script. The other thing that they will say is that you should mirror the client. You should watch their breathing pattern. You should stare at their chest and watch their chest inflating and deflating and match your own breathing to them. Well, you know, I can see a little bit of truth in that, but a lot of people don't really like their chest being stared at. It's a bit, impersonal. It might even be a bit intrusive. So I don't do that either. But I suppose if you looked at a video, then you would find that my breathing probably was syncing with the other person. And if that's true, and I've never checked, by the way, then that's because I'm doing it unconsciously. But there's no doubt that I am trying to achieve some degree of resonance with the other person so that I can go to that place and I can take them with me or help them to go to that place. It's an incredibly hard thing to describe, but that's about the best way that I can say it. So what else do I do? What is important? What do I think is important? These are my views now. You probably won't find these in any books. I think voice is really important. I think the way you speak is really important. I think the words and the language that you use are very important and should appeal to the unconscious mind. A great place to start, I think, and I've recommended it to a few people, is to read fairy tales. Because like I said, you're all hypnotists. Those of you who've had children will have read fairy stories to get them to sleep. And they all start the same way. Once upon a time, the beautiful princess who lived in the enchanted castle. And there's a certain scan to the words, a bit like poetry. And it ends, and then they all lived happily ever after. There are other people that speak in that way that seem to have perfected it, even if they don't know it. And a person that I particularly admire for his work, but also because he's a hypnotist, even if he doesn't know it, is David Attenborough, the naturalist. I mean, his programs on TV are fantastic, but his voice and his delivery, well, they take me there, and I'm sure that that's part of the secret of why his TV programs are so successful. Dylan Thomas, the poet, particularly under Milk Wood, his verse, and if you can find a recording of him actually reading his words, they are definitely hypnotic. And so voice is important. What else is important? Well, posture is important. I don't quite know why, but I think the way you move your hands is important, because if you can move your hands, it means you are connecting to the unconscious mind. And particularly if you watch somebody like Richard Bandler, his hands are doing a lot of moving. And He will find it's almost like there's a glass screen in front of him, and it's almost as if he's putting little post-its on the screen, and he's using different emotions for different parts. Again, I'm sure he's not thinking about that, but that's just the way that it looks. So that seems to help. Is that going to help you to hypnotize anybody else? Well, I don't know. But it'll get you thinking about it. So I've got a few. This might be the time. I do have a few questions that have come in because they're pretty good questions, and that might help me explain a little bit more about what hypnosis is and how can you use it. I've got two questions that have been posted online, and I've got two more that have been done offline. And there's one comment. First of all, Laura, you've had some bad luck. This is not acceptable for my show about luck, so I do hope the technology has worked for you today. But anyway, thank you that you enjoyed the last show about goals, and I hope they helped. So I'll deal with the ones that have been posted offline first. And the first of these is from Daniela. Hello, Daniela. I hope you're with us. Have you ever hypnotized somebody who doesn't speak your language? Wow, I thought I'd been asked every question about hypnosis, but not that one. And the answer is yes, I have. So I've just spoken to you about the importance of the words that you use, and now I'm saying it really doesn't matter if the other person can understand a word you're saying. Well, actually, that's true. I know that's a tough one to grasp, but somebody said to me, I bet you could hypnotize somebody reading them the telephone directory. Well, I don't know whether I could, and I certainly haven't tried it. But I can give you another example. Some years ago, I used to live in the country, and where there were a lot of wild dogs, and they could be quite scary, coming up to you and barking and growling, all the rest of it. And so I thought, I'm going to hypnotize the dogs. And I didn't expect it to work, but the funny thing is that it did. And when I got pretty confident, I don't recommend this to you either, this is definitely a health and safety moment, I used to put my hand in their mouth. That was a final test. And so far, fingers crossed, I have a 100% record, but I don't do that anymore with dogs. It is a bit dangerous, and sooner or later, I know I'm going to get caught out. So yes, they don't have to speak your language. It obviously makes it easier if they do. Thank you for the question, Daniela. And another one from Andrew. Sometimes people put bad experiences that they would rather forget to the back of their mind. That is very, very true. What happens if bad stuff surfaces under hypnosis? Great question. And this is another health and safety moment. People do put bad stuff to the back of their mind, or well, it might be in the middle of their mind, who knows? And we are all good at blocking stuff and draining the emotion away from some of the terrible things that sometimes happen to people. But we are nowhere near perfect at that. And when we have bad memories, they're always there. They're like a boil that is festering. And that's one of the reasons why people have post-traumatic stress disorder. So I think that that particular abscess has to be lanced. And I think that those memories have to come free. And these really do take advanced techniques and definitely are not to be experimented with. And quite a lot of the work that I do with people is just on this subject. But you can have abreactions. I mentioned my mother. She had one. It scared me. And if you're going to be a hypnotherapist, then these are things that you have to expect. But that should never stop you. Well, it doesn't stop me. But there again, as I mentioned, I do have a lot of experience. But the results that you can get with such people can be quite dramatic. So I think I answered that. Yeah, I did. And we've got a couple of questions now that have been posted. Carol, thank you, Carol. Welcome to the show. I know you've been to several of them. Could I use hypnosis to question myself? Well, you probably could. I'll come back to that. To find out what I truly want, as I think my head rules my heart, and I'd like my heart to speak. Then she says, how do I find a hypnotist? Well, there's several different bits to that question, so I'll take them one at a time. Could I use hypnosis to question myself? Yes, I think you could. But my opinion, and it's only my opinion, is that you shouldn't waste the time. Why would you want to question yourself? Because the truth is that the truth will be in your unconscious mind. So far better to connect to that, and that does not need to be a question. I mean, I can think of circumstances where it could be, so it's not a bad thing, but I think there are better ways of getting those kind of answers. To find out what I truly want, as I think my head rules my heart, and I'd like my heart to speak. Yeah, that's well put. And a lot of things that we do feel in the heart, we can feel them in the head as well. But the important thing is that these important things like what do you truly want to know, that is when you have to connect to the unconscious. So I think just by going into trance, just by practicing meditation and mindfulness, just by quietening your busy conscious mind, these answers will come to you. You don't need to ask the question. They will come to you. I suppose you could write on a piece of paper, before you do your meditation, a question. I think, yeah, actually, I'm beginning to think that would work pretty well. But you don't have to do it like that. Often if you go out even for a walk, which is a kind of meditation, with a problem, as long as you don't overthink the problem while you're walking, answers will often come. So there we are. I don't know whether I've confused you more, Carol. I hope not. And how do I find a hypnotist? Well, it's easy to find a hypnotist. You can look on Google and you'll probably find one living within half a mile of you. You'll probably find 10. The difficult thing is, how do you find a good and preferably a great hypnotist? And that is a lot more difficult. And there are plenty of these people who are good and great, but actually finding out who they are is a tough one. I would say word of mouth. Look at people who've been. Look at people where you can see the change in them. You can't go wrong with people like Bandler and McKenna, who are names that have been out there forever. Anybody really who's been trained by Bandler and McKenna and who still work with them, as I do, I think, they obviously carry the confidence of the masters, so that's going to help. Anybody who's got a master practitioner certificate in NLP, for instance, they should, if they were trained by the right people, they should know what they're doing. So again, I haven't really been able to answer that, Carol, although it's a good question. And like I say, I've seen some pretty awful hypnotists that I wouldn't want to go to. But fortunately, we're not all like that. I'm assuming that I'm not in that category. I don't think I am. I know I'm not. All right. Lucy, how can I fit hypnosis into my work schedule at my desk or between meetings? Well, I'm guessing, Lucy, you're talking about self-hypnosis, and you can do that quite easily, and it doesn't take very long. You can get into an altered state in 5 seconds or 10 seconds or 30 seconds or a minute. It doesn't need to be. So my recommendation is you check out my last show on mindfulness and meditation, and I think I give you quite a few examples there. And I'll I'll give one now, just for the sake of it. Stare at something in front of you and do not move a muscle. Just like that. And as I said in the show, and I wasn't joking, make sure your tongue is still as well. The only muscles that should be working are your heart and your lungs, for obvious reasons. Okay, so I don't see any other questions. There is still time to ask one if you like, but I thought, with your permission, I would try a little bit of a trance. And I didn't make a firm decision. I'd decided this is something that I might do. I would see how I felt at the time. And we do have 5 minutes left, so why not? And this little trance varies. By the way, remember the health and safety warning. If you can't relax and concentrate on me, switch off now. This is a trance that I use in one way or another with all of my clients. So here we go. Close your eyes. Now, if you're watching this show, the chances are that you want to make a change in your life. Generally speaking, people want to move away from something that they're tired of, fed up with, or they want to move towards something, and they might not even know what it is, but it's something that they feel is drawing them in that direction. So, there will have been times when you will have been really awesome. I mentioned earlier about we're all good at something. I get in the zone when I'm hypnotizing people. I'm not really aware of what I'm speaking or what I'm doing. I just do it, and I love doing it, and afterwards I feel great. Well, my question to you, particularly my question to your unconscious mind, and here I am asking questions, Carol, my question to you is I want you to think of a time when you were really good at something. We've all been good at something. So what was it? It might have been when you were playing sport. It might have been when you were making a speech. It could have been something at work, something with a friend, sometime when you really were awesome. So, have you got that in your mind? Good. Now, I want you to add, because you see, this is your own personal movie, and our brains are so many of our brain cells are devoted to visualization, as we call it. So this is your opportunity to make your own movie about your favorite subject. It's about you. So think of this awesome time. What were you doing? See the pictures in your mind. Who were you with? What was the weather like? Can you remember what you were wearing? Can you remember what time of day it was? Can you remember the month, the year even? You'd be surprised the amount of detail that you can dredge up, because people say the unconscious mind never forgets anything, and they may well be right, but it certainly stores a lot more information than we could ever believe. So, back to your awesome self. What else is in this movie? Is there a soundtrack? Well, for many years now, all the best movies have had a soundtrack, so make sure there's a soundtrack with your movie too. Music, perhaps, conversation, noises of nature, who knows? But bring those noises back. Yeah. And how did you feel on this occasion when you were so awesome? How did you feel? And what part of your body did you feel it? Because we're all different. We all get these goosebumpy sensations somewhere. Great. Now, we've got a pretty good movie here. Lots of visual detail, lots of sounds and pleasing noises, and feelings. Because feelings is pretty much closely connected to emotions, and emotions are very strong thoughts to have. Now, here's a question for your unconscious mind. If you could describe all of these experiences in just one word, not two, if you could describe all of these experiences in just one word, what would that word be? Okay, you have your word now. If that word had a color, what would the color be? And if that word had music associated with it, I wonder, what would that music be? And another question, and I think this might be my last one. And if this one word that summarizes the awesome you, if you could taste it, what would it taste like? Well, that was an interesting little journey. So let's go a little further with this one. I'm now asking your unconscious mind to let go of some stuff and to think about what it really wants to do. What is it that it wants to move to? What do you want to be awesome at next? What's next on your agenda? Do you know what it is? Are you getting any clues? Well, if you are, I want you to think about how can you use this word, the color of this word, the noise or music that might be associated with it, and the taste and the emotions. How could you use all of that to continually remind yourself of what you want, where you want to go? Because in previous videos on YouTube, I've talked about neuroplasticity. We used to think that our nerve cells were specialized for a particular function, but now we know that they're not. Now they know that they can be recruited to do other kind of stuff. And we also know that sooner or later the unconscious mind will find the perfect neural network to process this information and to be able to retrieve it quickly. And the more times we retrieve this sort of information, the more times we go through this neural network that's been set up, a process called myelination sets in. And that's another video I've done on YouTube. But basically myelination is the more you use it, the faster it gets. Just like a thick copper wire can conduct more electricity than a thin one, so can a myelinated nerve cell conduct more information more quickly. So there's some magic of the unconscious mind. And very soon, I'm going to ask you to open your eyes again, but not just yet, because I want you to take a few seconds, just allowing your unconscious mind at the speed of light or something very close to that, process some of this information. Some things may become clear now. Some things may take a little longer. But as you sleep and dream tonight, your unconscious mind will not be sleeping. It will be working away, finding the stuff that it likes, finding the stuff that resonates with it, that you can use in the rest of your life. So now time to come back to whatever you are doing. Start listening. What can you hear in your room or wherever you are? Tune in. What can you feel? And what can you see? So open your eyes now if you're ready, knowing that you can enjoy the rest of the day, and who knows, quite possibly the rest of your very long life. So I think that's a good place to end. I hope you're not too zoned out, but it is a nice feeling. I almost ran into a car when I was walking away from my office in Harley Street the other day because I was pretty zoned out too. So be careful wherever you go. I hope you have a truly entrancing week. We'll be back on the show, same time next week. Make sure you infect everybody around you with those good feelings, and I will see you soon. Thanks for supporting the channel. Goodbye.